Hi, and welcome back to another episode of TubaPeopleTV, where we talk about Arnold Jacobs all of the time. Puddles and I are here on lovely Riverside Drive in Berwyn, Illinois, with Rich Armandi. Rich, thanks so much for participating in this.
Thank you.
This project.
I'm thrilled to be a part of this project. Thank you so much.
Now, Rich is just a couple of years older than I am, and when I was in school up in Evanston, I heard about Rich Armandi quite a bit. I hear your name quite a bit, and you were starting.
I've seen my picture in the post office.
Maybe it was the post. I did go to the post office quite a bit. Maybe that's what it was. Now that I think about it. Anyway, Rich is a valued colleague and a well-known freelance tubist and bassist here in Chicagoland, and a former student of Arnold Jacobs. So thanks for joining us. I'm wondering, Rich, if you can tell us about your first experience with Mr. Jacobs.
Okay. Well, I guess my first experience with him was it's a little hazy, but I probably went to a concert and heard him, and in my youthful exuberance, I went up to him. I'm a tuba player. Talked him up and chatted him up, and he was always very wonderful. And I, of course, heard his magnificent sound that we still marvel at. Anyway, I had my first lesson with him when I was 16 years old. After I had, kept calling him. He'd say, "Call me next week. Call me next week. Call me next week. Call me next week." And it was effective for him, I'm sure, because it separated those who I know of many colleagues since. Over the years who got really put off by that and their egos got hurt, but he's a busy man and he didn't want people to just be able to say, "Oh, I studied with Arnold Jacobs and had a lesson," or something.
He wasn't interested in just the tire kickers. I mean, he was one of the...
Yeah. So anyway, I had my first lesson when I was 16 years old, and that was quite an experience just from the get-go. Driving down to the south side, at the time I lived on the northwest side, Lawrence and Cicero, that area, and drove down to 55th and Normal to it was the saddest house on the block. Weeds were overgrown, and these nice brick homes on the block, and his was that what do they call that stuff? Those shingles, asphalt shingles and stuff. Anyway, go in and the place looked like a cyclone hit it. Stuff everywhere, and I believe, if I recall correctly, I had to wait because I think Mike Sanders was in there.
Oh, having a lesson, all right.
I believe so. Okay. This is so long ago that I'm not real sure, but I did hear this tremendous sound coming from the basement as I'm sitting there. So he leaves, and I have to go down, and I've got my tuba and my briefcase, and I go into through the kitchen, which has like piled high with dishes from looked like 3 days, and then to the basement stairs, and those are piled high up with magazines and papers, and so I'm negotiating the tuba and the briefcase with his little dog nipping at my heels at the same time. So that made an impression. Finally get downstairs, and there's tubas everywhere, and machines, and clutter, and But anyway, that
sounds
was
pretty typical for Normal.
Yeah, indeed.
Was there? Do you remember once the lesson started? Do you remember anything particular about it? Was there?
Well, I played for him, and again, I'm 16 years old. I was completely self-taught. I never had any lessons prior to that, I had every problem in the book. I mean, I had acquired a degree of technique on the instrument, but I was real tight and played with a tiny embouchure, tight everything. So I had every problem in the book, but I also had the ego and stupidity of a young kid. So after the lesson, I mean, he was very encouraging, and encouraged my musical approach to things, because I was an expressive player, and he tried to open me up. He got me on the machines and got me open, and that was stunning. because within 10 minutes or less, he had me playing better than ever, which was an experience that subsequently happened just about every single lesson I had with him since then. And it was like a drug, really.
Yeah, you go in there at this level and you leave at that level.
Oh,
and then you come back.
You go in at this level in literally 5 or 10 minutes, or he'd get you up here.
Yeah.
And then maybe you'd stay up there for a while, and then you'd leave, and then,
But it was
very frustrating.
This stair step effect, over time.
Well, that would have been ideal. It didn't always seem that way, but yeah, we keep at it till we get it right. That's for sure.
That's right.
So anyway, I remember going back to my high school, and my friends asked me, "Oh, so how was your lesson with Arnold Jacobs?" And I'm going, "Oh yeah," he said, I played real good, and I just got to work a little bit on my breathing. Yeah.
Very good. And you studied with him, for about 30 years?
A long time. I mean, I had maybe early on, I had one or two lessons a year. I did start, though. He recommended me to go to study regularly and privately with Roger Rocco, which I did.
Yeah. And
so Roger's a very important person to me in my musical life. While in college, when I got to college, I studied with Mr. Jacobs all through college, even though he wasn't strictly speaking on the faculty at Roosevelt University. But I studied with him anyway, either through Civic, getting Civic scholarships, or on my own.
Yeah. And
for a good 6 or 8 years, I had an extended college career. I spent 11 years getting my bachelor's degree.
Hey, way to go! Nice.
And then 2 more with my master's. Mostly because they gave me a scholarship that was renewable as long as I didn't graduate. So, okay.
It seems like there's something wrong with that incentive. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but
it was good for you.
Professional student is it's a nice life. It can be. But anyway, I kept studying with him, of course, all through that time, and maybe a lesson, sometimes weekly, sometimes every other week, but a lot of lessons. And then after that, 1 or 2 a year for quite a long time. So I don't know if it's true, but I would wager that I might have had as many lessons with Mr. Jacobs as anybody alive. That doesn't mean I absorbed all the he had to give. I still feel I really only got the tip of the iceberg, because I had and probably still continue to have a pretty thick noggin, and between Roger and Mr. Jacobs, it took quite a bit for me to finally get it.
Well, that's great. Thanks.
Then again, it took it was somewhat of a maturity issue on my part, because Mr. Jacobs would always talk at a very high level, and it could be very intimidating, and I oftentimes just got all. Talk for 40 minutes about, well, do this. No, stop, play 2 notes. Oh, stop, do this. Blah, blah. I'm like this, and then he'd say, okay, now forget all that and just play. Not so easy to do.
You weren't able to forget it as well. All right, well, very good. Rich, I'm wondering if in your lessons with Mr. Jacobs, if solfege ever came up.
Oh, most certainly. He was a strong proponent of the study of solfege, and I think mostly, of course, to get us out of the thinking or the mode of trying to play this hunk of brass and try to be a machine operator, and rather be the musician totally. I mean, I remember him saying 85 to 90% of our awareness should be on the musical message, and perhaps only 10% on the perception of what's going on, or the readout of what might be going on, and totally on delivering the musical message. And one of the best ways to attain that is through the study of solfege. I took that to heart. I studied solfege at Roosevelt University with another great influence in my musical life, Ralph Dodds. I not only took his theory classes and ear training classes in which solfege was an intrinsic part of it, but I also studied with him privately after I had done the courses that required for quite a few years, actually, both ear training and solfege. And again, I'm still determined to be the very best musician I can be. Arnold Jacobs and others are my mentors and heroes, and I have a burning desire to be a wonderful, just be the musician I think I can be.
Musician, music, and it seems to me that in my travels, when you mentioned the name Jacobs, Arnold Jacobs, to somebody who's maybe not initiated into his teaching on an intimate level, there's this notion, oh, that's the breathing guy.
Right.
But really, he was first and foremost the music guy.
Absolutely. I mean, and when you listen to him play, music poured from his every pore in his body, and yet he was such a great mind that his study of the body and biology and all that served only to uncover, I believe, the answers he was seeking out in order to be able to play better. But I guess given his physical challenges,
limitations.
Limitations. But and I mean, let's remember that in his studio there were not just brass players, but woodwind players, oboe players, singers.
Mm-hmm.
I am not sure if any string players ever got to him, but they would have benefited from his teaching. I have many string-based students. I approach them with the same idea in mind. The instrument second and music first. I get my students to think musically and let their body respond to that. I don't know of any other bass teacher that approaches it that way, mm-hmm. but hopefully there are. But
that's great.
Jake was a profound influence in every aspect, and he also had the incredible ability to say things in such a fundamental, elemental way. He always got right to the issue, and I always had the sense that this is a man that knows the truth, mm-hmm. and when so few, I've been to other teachers who, those who were old school, espousing, mm-hmm. Hard gut and all this stuff, right. And
Yeah, he was very different, and he really brought to lesson teaching, private teaching, applied teaching. I think he took it out of the anecdotal and put it into the empirical arena because of the research that he did, yes. And then the experiments that he conducted, yes, in the early 50s with Herseth and
sure,
and Lambert and Phil Farkas and right. himself, and
absolutely,
that was that. I think that you can rightly perceive that he had the truth because he wasn't. It wasn't just how it worked for him; it was how it worked for the human person.
And plus, he had the great benefit of having some of the greatest brass players at his disposal to utilize in his studies, and we're all the beneficiaries of it. It bugs me sometimes when I read or hear people speak, or I read people's publications. I can't think of any names, nor will I mention them, but I have run across this and that out there over the years that people say, they mimic what Mr. Jacobs talks about, but take credit for it themselves.
Oh yeah, I've seen a few of those myself.
Yeah, that's pretty unsavory, especially to those of us who know, right. who had direct contact with him, and that I think, quite frankly, and quite rightly, he revolutionized brass playing the world over but it was not unusual for me to, the guy coming out of his studio might be, you know, from somewhere in the United States. The guy going in is from France or Germany or, you know,
all over the place.
All over.
That's right.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, we're some lucky dudes.
This is true.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rich, I'm wondering if during your many years of lessons, if you have any light bulb moment that you can share with us that you remember really strongly. Maybe something he said, a gadget that he used, perhaps a piece that you were working on. Anything come to mind?
Oh, several. Let's see. I'll start with. I'll never forget. I forget when this was, and even though he probably said it in so many ways, so many times, it seemed to be just a casual remark one time that he mentioned. Well, the sensors receive information and the motors impart information. And the sensors are not connected to the motors. And if you try to play utilizing the motors or trying to sense what the motors are doing,
right,
it ain't going to work. Like I say, he probably mentioned it a million times, a million different ways. He had a fantastic ability to say the same thing myriad ways to get through to any kind of a student. Mm-hmm. But it finally stop trying to, control.
That's really great. Yeah. Anything else?
Some of the gadgets. I mean, again, I had every problem in the book. I was a tough nut to crack, both I think mentally and physically. I mean, when as a youngster, I ingrained myself with these terrible habits that took many years to get past. And I of course bought into everything he said. It just didn't always seem to work out. But I continued to plug along and try to be as expressive as I could. Mm-hmm. But I actually experienced a couple of breakdowns where I basically had to start all over again.
Oh, okay. Was he helpful with that?
Actually, I have to honestly say no, because but I put it on myself. Mm-hmm. I was not at the maturity, the level of maturity to take what he would say and apply it correctly, or not turn it into. I had issues with, I believe, thinking what I played was a reflection of who I am.
I see.
And that's.
Well, what about you were about to say one of the gadgets? Was there?
Oh yeah, I always loved the thing with the two lead balls, mm-hmm, in it that you could blow in and you could exhale and inhale, and it would show the readout of, mm-hmm, and he would play with the air stopper or mm-hmm, whatever you might call it.
He would regulate the stream or the resistance.
Yes, he'd regulate the pressure, and so that sometimes it was super easy, sometimes it was difficult. And that helped me to open up, and
that's great.
That's one of them.
Did you, since you had such a long course of study over 30 years, did you notice anything in terms of his pedagogy? Was the way he taught you the same at the beginning as it was at the end, or was there a shift, or did you remember anything?
Gradually over the years. I mean, I think when I first got to him, he was very focused on getting people's breathing together, mm-hmm, properly, and getting the maximum efficiency out of the use of our bodies, and still always emphasizing the musical product. But I know for myself, I needed that focus, mm-hmm, because I'd take shallow, small breaths. I was all tight in here most of the time. Tight in here. That's a mess.
Right. What about in terms of music?
Oh, he would.
Working on music.
It was always a wonderful example of expressive music making. I do remember I was preparing a recital. Could have been my master's recital, and I was playing this unaccompanied piece. It was called Canzonet by Claude Baker. I don't know if you're aware of it, but it's solo tuba, and it's not avant-garde in the sense that you use non-traditional sounds and things. It was all written out and everything, but it was not theme and variation, shall we say. It was very, very modern piece, and I'll never forget, man. I played some of it for him, and he just looked at me and said, that was boring as hell. That was a wake-up call, because I'm trying to, play this very modern piece and just nail the intervals, which were all over the place, and still had to make music out of it, some kind of
right. Well, and speaking of music, I mean, Jacobs was in the earlier days of the Chicago Symphony, he often played jazz bass.
Right.
And you are known in Chicago for your not only your classical tuba skills, but also jazz tuba skills and jazz bass skills. Was there any sort of encouragement from him?
Absolutely. My first lesson, in fact, he suggested that I take up the bass, because I think he could sense I was, even at a young age, I was going to pursue a life in music. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, there's only one tuba in an orchestra, you have a lot more opportunities to play music if you play the bass. I did not take him up on that suggestion until I was 25 years old. But I did start listening to jazz as a teenager. I was able to get this great radio station in my car from Rochester, New York, of all places. And this fellow, Harry Abraham, played jazz of all eras, from Louis Armstrong and even earlier to the most modern avant-garde stuff. And it was catching my ear, and I realized this is art music. This is not jive. It's not commercial. This is real music, and started pulling me. And then the bass started noticing great bassists like Ray Brown and Charles Mingus, Paul Chambers, etc.
Did you take did you play any jazz for Jake in a lesson or anything?
I don't recall ever doing so.
Okay.
I might have, but again, my brain, this is, I don't think so, but he was always very encouraging of that. He was a bassist himself.
He would have loved to have heard it.
Yeah. And he was, of course, a great singer, and with that wonderful resonant voice of his, my goodness, and some of the old timers, when I started getting on the scene, they would tell me about working jobs with Mr. Jacobs, and that he would be playing the bass and singing and even holding and shaking a maraca while playing. Yeah, that's what I heard. That I would have paid money to see, yeah, he was a tremendous. I play the bass because of his suggestion, and I'm only sorry I didn't take it up when he first said to do so, because I know I would have been a much better bassist now, and maybe better classical bassist as well. But anyway.
Well, certainly Jake had this very diverse interests in music, and he always
loved Miles Davis.
Yeah. I hear him often say, whether you play rock, whether you play jazz, whether you play pop, classical, whatever, just be the best that you can be at it.
Yeah, and strive to deliver the essence of the musical message.
Yeah.
And he was very in tune with all that stuff. It didn't matter that he played in the CSO.
Yeah.
I mean, it did, but if he didn't play in the CSO and he turned out to be a freelancer or whatever, he would have been a magnificent. He was a magnificent musician. Period.
Yeah.
Plus, of course, what a great scientist. I've still yet to meet anybody who had the range of and depth of knowledge that he had in so many areas. Not just the physical, but the psychological, and my God, I mean,
it was amazing.
Truly.
Well, Puddles and I would like to thank you for allowing us into your home, and we brought you a family-size bag of University of Oregon duck food. And Puddles, is hesitant to part with it, but I convinced him. So
Okay.
thank you, Rich.
You're very kind. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Back to you. Okay, good. That was good. That was nice. I think that'll be a nice middle section to this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really
Well, I hope.
Very lucky.
I,